I stood up here at the beginning of this offseason and told you guys that the addition of Nick Nurse would be more impactful than any personnel change that the Sixers could make. Well, only a couple games in, and we're starting to see the effects of why that is the case. In this video, I want to compare what Nick Nurse is doing to what the Sixers saw last year with Doc Rivers, look at some specific stats that are positive indicators for why it's working, and lay out overall expectations from here. Now, before I dive fully into it, I do want to make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button. That at this point in time, 82.7% of you guys tuning into these videos have not subscribed to the channel just yet. I want to keep the Sixers Digest family growing. We got plenty of big plans for the regular season, a ton of awesome stuff going up. I will be here to start to finish, breaking things down for you guys, and I want as many of you as possible along for the ride as well. So let's dive into today's topic, which is the effects that Nick Nurse is having. I want to start off this video just taking a look at probably the most notable change that we can stand out and just compare it to what we were looking for from Doc Rivers last year. So far under Nick Nurse this year, the Sixers are scoring 19 points off turnovers, 21.3 fast break points per game, and 55.7 points in the paint per game. Compare that to last year under Doc Rivers, and they had just 17.7 points per game off turnovers, 14.7 fast break points, and 47.9 points in the paint. Now, the reason that I think this is important, it is a change in identity for this team. That it's clear they're making a conscious effort to push the pace on the offense end, get in transition, and defensively, the system is night and day different. I want to circle back to that point specifically, but I want to talk a little bit more about the offensive end and specifically. So here's shout out to my guy, Mr. Crockpot over at Edge of Philly Sports. Does some awesome work over there. I do some post-game shows with him every so often, so feel free to tune into those as well. But what he tweeted was the Sixers are fun again. They're number one in the NBA in true shooting percentage at 61.3%. They're also tied for number one in offensive efficiency at 117.4. They are third in deflections at 18.3 with that defense, the seventh best defensive efficiency at 105.8, and 11th in pace overall at 103 there. The biggest thing is the ability for each of these guys to share the basketball. There is no longer this isocentric, soak up the shot clock, get one shot off mentality. Everyone is touching the basketball. Everyone is moving around. There's much more motion, much more cutting. This is coming off a season in which the Sixers ranked 29th in cutting on the year last year under Doc Rivers, that it was so much just space the floor, stand away, and let Joel Embiid and James Harden cook. While that worked to an extent and we saw success, that became way too predictable when we get to the postseason stage. Now, with this new Nick Nurse offense and defense, which I want to touch on once again, there is the effect for each guy to have their mark on every game. That it is no longer a one-man or two-man show. All five guys have an opportunity to have their moment on a day in and day out fashion. Now, to dive in specifically, Mr. Crockpot tweeted this in the third quarter last night. The Sixers had 32 assists through three quarters. They had 32 or more assists just 5 times during the entire 22-23 season. They finished the game last night against the Wizards with 37 assists. That ties their season high last year, and we're only 6 games into the season. So I'm quite comfortable in saying I do believe the Sixers are going to break that mark from a team standpoint, and it is that assist, that growing, that team-friendly basketball that we're really seeing the effects of. And the number one reason that I'm saying this is everyone is buying in, everyone is moving, and there are just more passes to make. That when it was this standstill, stagnant offense that Doc Rivers ran, it comes difficult. And Joel Embiid specifically is a guy who's drawn a ton of heat from a playmaking standpoint, and some of it he's absolutely earned. That he's not a guy who's natural as a playmaker. He's not at his best when passing the ball, but it also makes it harder when you're asking him to create passes in a way that Doc Rivers did that Nick Nurse is not. Joel has seen his assists grow this year because there are simply passes to make. There is a guy ducking into that dunker spot. There's a guy running a pin down screen and coming up for an open three-pointer that are simple passes for them to make. It's no longer trying to force a double team and eventually get this skip pass over the top for a corner three. It's a much more basic basketball play, and he is delivering on those. And that's good coaching. That is putting your best players in a better position to succeed. To jump into the team's overall stats that I thought were interested, this courtesy of Basketball Reference here, that obviously 5-1 on the season. The last game was the win against the Wizards. On the year, they're averaging 121.5 points per game. That is 4th in the NBA. They're also holding opponents just 108.3. That is 6th in the NBA. Their offensive rating of 121 is 1st across the entire NBA. Defensive rating of 107.9 is 7th in the NBA. And their net rating of plus 13.1 is 2nd across the NBA. Now, some of these will die down. That some of these, as the season progresses, as we get a larger sample size to work, I don't expect all of these to last. But what I am seeing is a new identity from this team showing that this is not the let's see how many points Joel Embiid can score, and yes, he's getting plenty, but it's how much this team can succeed, how much these guys are leaning on one another, giving each other opportunities to shine, and buying in from the complete standpoint. Now, I do want to touch on the defensive side of the ball because that also has impressed me because we are seeing these leaps and bounds. I just had a video dropping on Maxi's playmaking specifically that I recommend checking out on here. We are seeing leaps and bounds on the offensive end, but what we've seen from Nick Nurse, and I was a little skeptical of this working with the personnel, is this frantic defense that is chasing guys off the line, moving around, forcing bad shots, trapping guys, wrecking havoc, hands everywhere. That is what we've come to know. That worked incredibly effectively with the Toronto Raptors when there was such a wing-heavy system. And close your eyes and squint a little bit. This Sixers roster looks a little bit similar, that we now have an overload of wings. Guys like Robert Covington, KJ Martin, Nick Batum, who was awesome in his debut tonight. All these guys cycling off the bench provide different elements that the Sixers team has not had in years past. And the epicenter of all of this is Joel Embiid. That Nick Nurse has never had a big man with the rim protecting capabilities of Embiid, and he's clearly making that a focus. That was one of the things Nick Nurse first said when he got here of one of his goals for Joel Embiid is to rise up as a defensive presence, that he wanted more swings was the word that he used. He wanted him blocking shots. And to touch on Embiid's stats specifically, let's look at those block shots. Currently averaging 2.0 blocks per game. That is the highest since his rookie year when he came into the NBA. Now, I don't think the block numbers decreasing is that he should be criticized that heavily for that. There's almost an extent to when you see some block numbers go down for these high-level rim protectors, it's almost a sign of respect of guys not wanting to try you. If they see you in the paint, they're just not going to shoot that shot or try and finish around you. But I also do think Embiid has regressed or had regressed previously to this year in just his willingness to buy in and commit on the defensive side of the ball. It is obviously understandable when he has now led the NBA in scoring 2 consecutive years that he was asked to do so much on the offensive end, a guy that's been top 5 in usage rate pretty much year in and year out since he's arrived and grown to center stage. So it was understandable to take a little bit of the workload off. But the way that this defense is built to function is it's everyone funneling things toward Joel and him cleaning things up. And he's been nothing short of spectacular defensively. That some of these numbers, it frankly feels like he should have more blocks from that. There was a game against the second game against the Raptors. He was only credited with 1 block. And from watching the game, I would have guessed that he had 4 or 5 because he was everywhere. And those alterations, those impacting shots, even if it doesn't go as a block in the stat sheet, are incredibly critical to getting the defensive stops that this team needs. Now, another point that I want to jump on with Joel's stats is the assists here, because this is where we're seeing the biggest point of growth. That throughout his career, he's averaged 3.5 assists per game. He's coming off 2 consecutive seasons, which he averaged 4.2 assists per game, which were each career highs for him. And this year, he's all the way up to 6.2 assists per game. We are going to see triple-double Joel for many points this season. That I think there will be several games in which he will reach that total. And by the way, his points are not dipping at all. That after leading the NBA in scoring the past 2 years with 30.6 points per game in 2021-2022, 33.1 points per game last year, he's at 32.5 to start the year. Never mind the fact that he's also not even had to play the fourth quarter in 2 out of the 6 games already this year. Now, the big test will be tomorrow night against the Boston Celtics. At this point, I'm recording this on Tuesday, so this will be before the Celtics game that this will be released to you guys. But that will be the big test where we have kind of a moment in time and a true measuring stick matchup because we have not seen that just yet. But it could not be more encouraging, the style of play that this team has embraced, that there is more team-friendly, the ball is popping, and just to pull this up again on the Doc vs. Nerd stats here, that it is trying to force turnovers, capitalize off those, get in the fast break, score in the paint. And because of all these points of focus or areas where the Sixers are drastically improving, we're seeing more from the same roster. A guy like Tobias Harris is having an incredible start to the season. And why is that? It's because he's bought in as a cutter. He's a guy that's getting easier buckets, and we're seeing his shot percentage and points go up because he's getting these better shots, these better opportunities. That it's one thing if we're seeing the classic Tobias Harris post up and shoot a tough fadeaway 2 at the end of the shot clock. It's a completely different story if he's making a baseline cut and then he has a layup around the rim. One is an incredibly high percentage shot, and the other is not. And we're seeing kind of the fat trimmed off the shot selection and just overall attitude with this team, and we're seeing it all translate in the best way possible. So I'm thrilled with what I've seen from the Sixers team so far. We're only 6 games in. It feels like everyone is buying in, and I do just once again want to point to the Joel Embiid stats of how much he is leading the charge with it. if he was not willing to grow as a passer this year, none of this works. That if he was not willing to adapt, play a more team-friendly style, this does not happen. But he is, and the Sixers are at the better for it. So while I will give Doc Rivers a little bit more credit than most when I talk about his progression last year, the goal was either you force a double team on Joel Embiid and then he kicks out to the perimeter, where the Sixers ranked number 1 in three-point percentage last year, or you go one-on-one with Joel Embiid and try your hand at that. And Joel Embiid did lead the NBA in scoring last year. And while that worked from an individual standpoint with Joel Embiid, as well as relatively high team success when it comes to the regular season and things like that, that is not a tactic that translates to playoff basketball. That becomes too predictable. Teams are able to throw more complex wrinkles into ways that stop it, and that is the biggest reason why the Sixers have failed to pass that second-round barrier. It's going to be a little different this year with Nick Nurse, with a different style, a coach that's willing to adapt on the fly. And another thing that has been awesome to see from Nick Nurse is when he has something that's working, he will not go away with it. There's been stretches throughout these first couple games, whether it be the pick and roll with Embiid and Maxey, where he sees that work, and all of a sudden they run that play 6 straight times, 6 straight possessions until the other team proves they can stop it. They also did it last night against the Wizards, where the Wizards switched into a zone defense, and they just kept hammering the ball to Joel right at the free throw line, and he shot a little fadeaway. Joel Embiid had 29 points in the third quarter because of this. He did not miss a single shot in the third quarter. The highest points in a single quarter in Sixers franchise history, and one of 3 players in NBA history to do that without missing a shot. That's how special this guy is. That's how special this offense is, and Nick Nurse is capitalizing on all of this. As I mentioned, tomorrow is a big day against the Celtics. That will be the first true measuring stick matchup. If you want to call the Milwaukee Bucks one for game 1, you can, but honestly, the Bucks have not been playing good basketball, and that was the first look that we've got of the Sixers team. They look a little bit different than they did. I mean, we've got new personnel following the James Harden trade. It looks like guys understand their roles a little more. Kelly Oubre feels more comfortable, has gotten into the flow of things, so there's plenty more to be excited about this time around. We will see how they measure up in that matchup, but for me, I could not be more thrilled with the early effects of the Nick Nurse offense. I want to hear what you guys think in the comments. Drop me a comment. Let me know your thoughts on Nurse, what you're most excited about, or who has stood out to you the most so far this season. Other than that, make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button, making sure you're sticking with me right here in Sixers Digest, and I'll be talking with you next time. Peace.